podcast excellence since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network, kingofpodcasts.com.
How long do you think it's going to take before the streaming providers are able to create AI playlists and DJs just as good as radio? Because, radio is also automated.
The King of Podcasts radio network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
So it wasn't anything necessarily that I had for a particular topic that was, current or newsworthy that I was going to talk about tonight. Because tonight I'm going to take another one of those episodes to go ahead and go after the decline of radio and why it's causing it. And I wanted to go more to a deep dive about that tonight. And as I continue to go ahead and look at the mistakes that radio has made, which I want to make sure and say that I am not trying to go ahead and dismiss the radio talent that's brought on board by these big corporate radio giants that, God bless them. Some of these hosts that are on radio now, they've been given the chance to go on the radio and do something with themselves. And, in a very tough environment, in a medium that is not very well heralded anymore, trying to use their social media skills, trying to go and do something that can build up who they are and become something more important down the line. And I know they try. And I do follow several DJs that are out there in various radio stations and seeing what they're doing. And, it's so hard for them to get any kind of notice of who they are and what they're doing. It's really hard for them. They're not allowed to really do anything in terms of engaging with the audience, except for on their own social media channels, not on the FM dial that they're on or the stream that they're on as well. That's the radio station stream I'm talking about. They're not allowed to go ahead and really express their personality. And if they do, they got to talk about Diddy right now. They got to talk about whatever flat, unimportant celebrity gossip bullshit that's out there, because that's what they're told. That's what their show prep is required. They have to keep it safe. They're not allowed to go ahead and be stretching the line or stretching the boundaries of what's allowed on radio, according to their corporate betters. They got a hard time with it. So I never want to dismiss those that are doing radio now and the fact that you are in a horrible position. You might have had the same aspirations, ambitions, and dreams. Yes, I said that. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know who I heard it from. Okay. If you had those types of attributes that made you passionate about going into the world of radio, God bless you for trying. But you know that you are in an uphill battle, that if you were ambitious enough to go and say, I'm going to just keep trying no matter what, then go right ahead. You don't know if you're going to be able to get a next paycheck coming up. So easy, just like journalists now that realize, okay, we're going to go into this big corporate newspaper or magazine and hope that everything's going to work out okay. But we know this. It's becoming extremely difficult to go and do this. But unlike newspapers and magazines, which I've talked about extensively on the program here, I talk about the fact that tech AI is going to basically take over newspapers and magazines. They're already getting their clutches on now. Tech AI, I've already said it very clearly. I will say it one more time, and I'll keep saying it. I'm going to keep hitting people over the head with it. Tech AI right now, Google Gemini, your ChatGPTs, among others. The fact of the matter is that they are able to go ahead and make deals right now, advancing money, which, if not doing something where, like in California, you have a public-private partnership, the likes of Google or Facebook or ChatGPT or OpenAI are willing to go ahead and spend money to access archives, access the IP, access particular legacy publications. And then, at the right moment, these are all publications and journalistic outlets that are in decline. But they're in immediate decline. They are desperate right now because not only are they in debt, they have no money coming in. And so it's just a matter of time. And they're laying so many people off as well. They're not going to be able to go and sustain what they're doing right now with what they're doing. So this little bit of cash influx coming into them is to keep them operating on a continue to decline. But what will happen is that the decline will happen and be determined by the tech AI companies once the money train, the gravy train stops. They'll take them over. They'll no private equity, nothing like that. They're just going to be able to buy them for nothing. The IP will be available. That particular journalistic outlet will go ahead and have to fold. They'll have to go and let all their people go. So the website, the publication archives, all the intellectual property, all of it. Any of these tech AI companies can buy for nothing at such a good deal. And they're not going to hire anybody else to go and operate it because they're going to let all it become computer algorithmically generated. That's all they're going to have to do. With people to do data input for them. Probably. So no journalists, you'll just have data gatherers. That's it. That's all you got to have. It's like an agate in a sports section of a newsroom. You're just going to get box scores. You're going to get information. You're just going to have to write it in. That's it. You'll have beat reporters. You're just going to go and cover the beat and bring the information back. That's it. And disseminate it, transmit it, done. AI will do it for you. You're not writing a thing. AI will do it. Radio still has time before it goes completely away. And the truth is that I still hold on the radio as being a medium that can still withstand this digital disruption. And do you understand why I do this? The fact is that radio has certain attributes that distinguish it from anything that can be done with a computer AI. Because radio, unlike writing words on a page and writing a 500-word story, somebody communicating and engaging with listeners on the radio with talent, with emotion, with passion, with understanding, with knowing how to keep an audience engaged. However you're going to do that, with all five senses. Make them feel, make them sense all different types of emotions, especially if you give them happiness. Radio, under a different management, will succeed. It's already being proven now by smaller radio stations out there and some of our public radio counterparts, because it's happening. We've talked about some of those public radio outlets that are, they're doing music, they're doing things to help engage their audience. And they have hosts, they have people that are DJing on there, they're bringing in new talent, some of them are performing on stage for the station. It's taking back the freeform radio model that we had back in the 60s and 70s. It's a renaissance. It's not that big, but it's out there. And because we are in a streaming society, you can listen to those stations out there. It's quite interesting. I talked about that about a couple of years ago. We talked about all those stations that came from Austin, Texas, Seattle, Washington. It's really great. And I wish it was more of that. And, there are some stations that are out there that still succeed right now on a local front because they have an opportunity to. Because they're not beholden to some corporate shareholders, or because somebody is a single owner and says, we're just going to make something of it. There's a lot of ethnic, religious outlets. Hey, they get to go and do what they're doing. Maybe they're not going to get the biggest audience in the world, but they profit. They will sustain. They're doing something as a purpose to the local community. They're serving the public because the public owns the airways. People always forget about that. But as long as the SEC and other entities decide to go and continue to bail out these big corporate radio companies and what they're dealing with, then this can't change. I asked Google Gemini this week. I asked it, give me the information about the corporate radio conundrum right now and where we are with it in terms of the major radio owners in the USA. I asked for a financial summary. And you think about who holds them and who continues to keep all these companies alive, owning so many different radio stations that they should not be owning. They should not be allowed to have anymore. Let's list them. I've said this before, but I'm going to be a little more seminarial tonight. I mean, it's almost going to be a little more like a classroom tonight. I'm going to teach you all. Some of you already know what this is, but my thing is that I want to lay out the full argument here. Opening statement, almost like. So iHeartMedia, I worked for them at one point when they were Clear Channel. I worked for them. And at that time, between 2002 and 2007, I mean, they were again in not good shape. They were already in debt. You know, the Mays family put them in debt because of all those stations they bought. But the fact that they were able to go and get somebody to go and take the debt off of them was good for them. And all these radio stations that got bought together like it was because of this deregulation, the Telecommunications Act of 1996, the fact that there were companies who were able to go ahead and buy so many different companies, buy so many radio stations with money they didn't have and accumulating debt. And then somebody else buys them and buys their debt. The fact that it's allowed like that. Do these stations need to be all owned by these companies? No, that's the point. I'm not saying shut these companies down and just not let them go and live what they do. No, operate debt free or operate with debt that you can actually have enough capital to pay off. You don't need to be like Uber, okay? There's a valuation that companies have. What valuation are you targeting right now to iHeart, to Audacy, to all these other radio companies that are out there? They do not have the cash flow positive opportunity. No matter what stock shareholder, whatever financial analyst says this, they do not have it. How many times do I have to see stories in the radio industry rags about how they have to continue to go ahead and extend payments out? See, everybody talks about this week the fact that the SEC is rushing the Audacy bankruptcy deal so they can go ahead and get themselves up and going. Okay, I get that part. People are going into that as we speak. Okay, there's a lot of issues about the political implications because George Soros' company, Soros Fund Management, is going to hold the major shares of this property of Audacy. We can go on and talk about that. So let me take a story from Inside Radio just to explain this. Because the signal above the noise. Do not even worry about the fact of this political story, this angle that's going on here. I'm not worried about that. The only thing I look at with Soros Fund Management, whatever your political beliefs are, is that they are acting as a private equity. In the same way that iHeartMedia gets to operate, in the same way that Citadel or Cumulus gets to operate. Have private equity holding on to them. I'm going to get to that list, but I want to just get the story in real quick because this is current. So the FCC right now have enough votes right now to approve Audacy's proposed bankruptcy reorganization, 3-2 down party lines. Audacy could wrap up the Chapter 11 process that began in January, and while the application remains pending, no decision is final until the commission releases it, and it's not been yet. But what will happen is, under the plan approved by a federal judge in February, we covered it back then, Audacy's business will remain intact and it will see $1.6 billion in debt wiped out. So roughly about 2/3 of it, right? And Audacy will be able to emerge in the process with access to new loans and financing. No, they're going to get debt wiped out, cleared, and they're going to be able to find loans and financing to continue to operate. They don't have the money in their own coffers to operate. They're going to be allowed to get new loans and financing. For radio stations like this to be allowed like this, irresponsible. I don't understand why this is allowed and what this operation is going to be done. But again, everybody talks about the fact that billionaire George Soros is one of the people that's going to help Audacy get out of debt. Because Soros Fund Management will act like a private equity firm. They will hold approximately $450 million of Audacy's debt. And that would make him the largest stakeholder of the second largest radio company in the U.S. out of Chapter 11 reorganization. And according to bankruptcy court filings, Soros has assumed anywhere from 40% to more than half of the estimated $745 million of senior debt out of the $1.9 billion owed by Audacy. The debt will be converted into an equity stake in the company's post-bankruptcy, and it means Soros will be a major shareholder. Now, the part they're talking about is this foreign ownership. There's a rule in SEC ruling that indirect foreign ownership of more than 25% is not allowed, but something's going on where this is going to get pushed across, but whatever. But to get to the bankruptcy process, Audacy set up the transaction in a way that would allow restructuring to be completed and maintain short-term compliance with foreign ownership limits until it secures approval from the SEC to have indirect foreign ownership of more than 25%, which could take up to a year to complete. But what I would like to talk about more that's going on here is the fact that they're still dealing with the fact that they still have loans they can't pay off. So in the bankruptcy court issue that's going right now, back in August, there was a reorganization of its debtor in possession credit facility to aggregate the principal amount of $32 million, which is going to mature in August 19, 2024. And then Audacy was asking the court to extend the maturation date to September 30th, 2024. So yeah, principal, $32 million. Basically a loan they have to go ahead and pay off. They have to be able to pay off $32 million, and they had to go and extend another month to get it done because they had to wait for the bankruptcy dealing to be done to be able to go and pay it. But I can't tell you how many other times I've seen radio companies that are going to extend off liens or lenders or quotes, all this going on. They can continue to go ahead and extend their debt. And by the way, those shareholders, some of them that were idiots that decided to go ahead and buy into Audacy, then it got stock split. Also getting delisted for the New York Stock Exchange. And they're all holding the bag. And all these shareholders, hey, it's their fault for being a part of it, but you should have known better for letting a company like Audacy be able to go and be on the New York Stock Exchange in the first place. Be able to be a publicly traded stock. They can't make money on their own product because of poor mismanagement. They can't make money on their streaming or their podcasting because it doesn't make enough. They can't get any kind of capital from the money they have raised in public offering on the stock exchange. There's not enough shareholders that are going to take care of that and hold them up. They're not even the worst culprit. And the funniest part is that of all these radio owners, they all list themselves, the most, from the largest owner of stations, you can put them in order of the debt they hold. And they'll still be in order. As of second quarter 2024, iHeartMedia has $5.38 billion of total debt. They were, $20 billion in debt before. And out of Chapter 11, they were going to get it down to like 5.9, 5.7. And what have they paid right now since they came out of bankruptcy in 2019? I mean, a couple hundred, what am I thinking right now? 0.60, what? So like $6 million, I think. I think they paid down $6 million in debt in the last 5 years or so of what they've owned. They're owned primarily by institutional investors and investment funds. Some of the shareholders of this are BlackRock, Vanguard Group, and State Street. They own just about anything and everything. Right. 2019, significantly reduced debt load. But again, they have not been able to significantly take down their debt. Still $5.38 billion with a B. And then you have private equity that hold another debt. Bain Capital, Thomas H. Lee Partners were originally major private equity firms involved in the 2008 leveraged buyout of Clear Channel Communications, and they still have a stake in iHeartMedia. And they were allowed in 2019 to be on the New York Stock Exchange once again, or back in the stock market under the ticker symbol IHRT. And let me look at that wonderful price right now. Their shares are selling at $1.50 as I look at that today. Close of business September 26, $1.50. And if I even had to look in just like the last 6 months, they've hovered between maybe at $2 back in May after their second quarter earnings. They dropped back down. At one point this year, they were 87 cents on May 28th. Again, quarterly financials, down in net income, down in diluted EPS, down in net profit margin. As of 2023, they had 9,990 employees, But again, we've had cuts across the board in their setup. We know that. Their June earnings call, they missed by 10% on their EPS. Revenue, they beat it by 1.43%. So, again, they're making money off of what they're making right now in terms of podcasting. That's their revenue that they're claiming, which is not even like 10% of what their whole setup should be worth. I mean, they should be able to be making a lot more than that. Like their radio product should actually be making money, but they're not able to do that. And nobody's going to put them down for that. They're not going to get rigged about it. Now, as we mentioned with Audacy right now, $1.9 billion in total debt. No private equity until Soros Fund Management comes in. Now they become the private equity holder again, holding on to $415 million in debt. And coming out of this for Audacy, they're going to still be in debt. Over $1 billion. $1.6 billion in debt. And as for Audacy, make sure to mention this, they're not even on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. They're on the OTC markets. They're a pink stock at 98 cents right now. And by the way, they went down 11% today. If I look at the last 6 months for them, 0.09. They're 9 cents. 9 cents right now. They were at 29 cents at its highest on April 3rd in the last 6 months. But they have continued to go down to the point where we're looking at now they were at 5 cents a couple days ago as the bankruptcy announcement was going on. That's incredible. And they're still allowed to be up there. For threat of being delisted. Next up is Cumulus Media. They own $1.1 billion in debt. And they emerged out of bankruptcy in 2018. Majority owned by its creditors. Filed Chapter 11 in 2017, emerged in 2018. No private equity for them. Town Square Media, fourth largest. They have approximately $585 million in total debt. And ownership is Oaktree Capital Management, a private equity firm with a majority stake. Beasley Media Group, $21 million in total debt. The Beasley family still has a significant ownership stake. No private equity. And they're also publicly traded, by the way. I mean, well, their price, they're at 50 cents right now. Oh, excuse me, $11.34. Okay, a little bit better. Still not good. And so that's where we are right now. And radio, as long as they're being managed as they are, they're going to continue to just stay where they are. They're not going to do anything. Now, everyone wants to talk about that they're being plateaued. There's still the fact that 92% of people will listen to audio. Originally they said that in a 2023 study by Edison Research that in 2010, 93% of people would listen to radio, and now it's down to 82%. 12 years old and older, tuning in weekly. Radio advertising revenue has plateaued, and streaming platforms are witnessing double-digit growth year over year. And to think that all these companies, bankruptcies, downsizing, they're allowed to operate as they do. We're talking about SiriusXM also in their own radio turmoil as well, financial turmoil. Navigated bankruptcies, massive debt loads and layoffs, thousands of employees jobless. A wasteland. And some of them being allowed to go ahead and get consumed by vulture capital, of which they'll never be able to get out from under. And it's allowed to happen. Google Gemini actually did give me quite a bit of information when it comes to the decline of radio because over-leveraged acquisitions, which was allowed from the deregulation. And there's been nothing to correct that. I mean, right now, look, if you look at media companies as we speak, they've all kind of, there's a lot of media and a lot of properties that are owned by just a couple of companies now, for the most part. But none of those companies own radio. Like Disney had their own little operation of Radio Disney. They let that go. They dropped it. None of the studios have it. Nothing for Paramount, nothing for Warner Bros. Discovery. They don't even buy into those. They might buy into TV stations, but they don't buy into radio stations. No interest in that. There was at a time. So radio doesn't have to be stuck to the way that things are right now with these companies being able to go ahead and operate as they can. They don't need to be holding on to all these stations. If there were just a handful of stations in every market right now, let me just tell you, if iHeartRadio, Audacy, if those top 5 companies, if they were made as a part of their bankruptcy filings, if they were made to sell some of the radio stations off, say, okay, you have all these different stations in the market. We're going to change the regulation around because, make it where deregulation can be allowed if they're able to go and keep themselves within a certain amount of debt, where they can show that their debt is not so outstanding that they can't be able to cover it if they have to just go ahead and pay it off. Manageable debt. I understand that within business there can be people that have that manageable debt. Of course, that's why it's so important on the balance sheet. But if you just let in the top, say 100 markets in the country, and there were several iHeartMedia stations, several Audacy stations, several Town Square, Cumulus stations, busy, if they were made to sell off some of their stations, imagine if those got owned by other ownership. If the local owners took over those stations, it would cause a ripple effect, because what would happen is those stations could be bought by local owners. They could bring in local talent. They could bring in a fresh approach to programming, not like the corporate radio giants, nothing that's not super automated. And they could go ahead and program some of the same genres possibly as these bigger corporate radio giants, which would create competition. And then something would have to happen these corporate radio stations would then start having to compete with the others because they don't have the monopoly they had once before. That was one thing that we used to have. There were obviously owners that had stations, before 1996, it used to be 2 AMs, 2 FMs. And that's a lot. That's a lot of stations you can still own. But if you had competition of the same type in other markets, then these big corporate giants would have to go and compete against the grassroots stations, which would actually create and foster creativity, foster great programming, foster engagement. Nothing like competition to make things better. If there's one thing that still continues today, even though I bitch and moan and complain about all these major studios and companies that own all the streaming, right? Disney and Netflix and Apple TV Plus and Hulu, they're all competing with each other. So there is competition among those, and that's good for us. I mean, for the fact of the matter is, remember all the money they were spending on content in the first place. They're still spending money on content. They're just spending more money on live sports. They're deviating some of their scripted content. They're not putting out as much as they used to anymore. They have to. But also at the detriment of the networks that they own and some of the linear content that they had before that they let it suffer and go by the wayside. That does suck. But at least what they're doing is there's competition amongst them. Radio doesn't have that. If you do, you have it in some of your major markets. I mean, if you look right now, they're the top 50 stations with the highest cum audience, right? What the biggest audience there is on a weekly basis. I looked at it the other day. It's still basically, it's New York, LA, and Chicago. Your top markets, San Francisco. Your top radio markets are big cities. They have audiences there listening in because there's competition among other stations. Because these big corporate stations, they go up against each other with radio. That's good. And they have live talent. And they have different music a little bit. I mean, they might have the homogenization of music out there, but for the most part, it's a little bit more like it used to be, at least somewhat. They also have SiriusXM with their channels to compete against as well. So that's not bad. At least there's something there. What about all these other markets? Where I live right here, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, wasteland. I mean, you do have stations that do well here, but I mean, part of it is because we've had some original management or people that were here operating heritage stations that were able to go and keep a lock on these big corporate companies that bought them from under them, where they sold to them, and they're able to go and do something to go and keep their communities intact. For the most part, in Miami, because we have several urban contemporary black-owned radio stations that they've always tried to make sure to go ahead and continue to serve that community. Hot 105, 99 Jams, always top 5. And meanwhile, Cox Communications, who owns a number of stations in the market in Miami, because of that, they're able to go and do things where they are also targeting with certain programming that also helps for them. Because they also have Easy 93.1, adult contemporary, soccer mom music, but they do have live talent. And they've been able to program as they can pretty easily for themselves. I mean, they're able to go and continue to get an audience there to listen to those stations, which is good for them. Rock on. But that's not everywhere. And the other part is that because of the homogenization you have of radio out there, you have so much talent that's there doing syndicated radio that's just getting worse. Worse as it goes. Because you have a lot of talent that's just getting too old for this now, and they're retiring, or they're just getting out, or they're getting fired or laid off. Because radio's not going to go ahead and respect tenure. They're not going to do that either. Just let it go. Same playlist you can hear everywhere else. And it's not as if you couldn't operate on a corporate level and do something that would still sustain an engagement with the audience. You just do it for a bigger audience. You could do that, but they don't want to do that. I'll never understand why. But part of it is because of the fact that we've said it before many times. You know, you have people that are in the radio business that don't know a thing about radio. Could not appreciate radio if you even told it to them and shared the stories of what we all enjoyed radio for in the first place. Couldn't tell you. But there's still room. There's still time for radio to continue to go ahead and come back and become a relevant force in media. There's still time. They're not going to have the short cliff that newspapers and magazines have right now. Network TV, short cliff, but radio doesn't have that yet. You can make changes to radio because radio is not held to those other betters of the bigger corporate giants that are out there, much bigger than them. You can get these radio stations, put them back to the people, and they can operate them and succeed with them. And then radio will be an option again. I totally believe that people will go ahead and want to listen to radio again. It's not hard for them to go listen to it on an app, and especially in their car. If they want to listen to something in the car, you know, they don't have CD players in there or any other kind of physical units you can insert. So if you're in your car now and you're not using Bluetooth, you're not using the Wi-Fi in there, people can still be behooving to go ahead and listen to AM, FM radio or HD radio if it's available in their car. They might not have access or choose not to go ahead and go to the sources in their infotainment system to go ahead and listen to something else. Maybe they'll listen to what FM, AM is on there because they're just kind of being lazy about it. And they just say, well, we'll just find something on here. It's going to be something on one of these radio stations that's going to be interesting. I can't tell you how many times I listen to a radio station now. If I'm just going to decide to go, I'm going to turn on the radio now, I can hit a commercial. Guaranteed if I got 6 to 10 presets, I can hit every preset and I'll hit a commercial break. I won't even hear a song. And if it's a talk radio station, might not even hear a talk segment. That's how often I hear commercials. I feel like I'm inundated with commercials every time I listen to the radio, or I try to listen to them. And trust me, I have an idea of when commercial breaks usually go. For talk radio, it's pretty simple. For FM radio, it's not that hard. It wasn't that long ago I remember what the radio stations used to do for the commercial breaks. It's just not, they don't want to do it anymore. They just don't. And it has caused indelible damage to the rest of the industry. The music industry is decimated because of this. Because radio is an outlet. Meanwhile, physical units are not a thing anymore. There's so much less, as we talked about a few weeks ago. once an $800 billion industry, now is like down to 32 billion. Or no, 800 million to 32 million, right? Streaming right now, you can still lure people to go to streaming, which what social media does is it does lure you to streaming. I can't tell you how many times I listen to a song I find on TikTok, and then I go look for it on Spotify to make sure I put it on a playlist. YouTube, same thing. Find a music video, I go look for the song on Spotify to go and add it. So I like to discover music from some place, and then I go ahead and I add it to my streaming service so I can listen to it on demand. But there's the part that I'm doing new music discovery. I could be doing that live. And that music discovery doesn't always have to be new music. It could be album cuts. Freeform radio. Because radio stations, when they used to be like a rock station or at least be a freeform station, they would experiment with other music. And we learn about other music. Imagine right now if a pop station were able to go ahead and expand their horizons right now. I think about that because one of my playlists are playing right now, okay? I think of the fact that if I was running a radio station now, and if you look what the Billboard charts have right now, it's such a stale lineup of music that you have, not to mention what songs are chosen by Radio Now to go and play regularly that are 6 to 12 months old. If I wanted to go ahead and add a playlist, make it a top 40, and of course, if I'm going to do a top 40 station, I'm not going to, be behooving to 440 songs and play them in heavy rotation. No. You play them in a certain rotation and take another 150 songs or so. Make it 200 songs that are in rotation, in a light rotation, or they're gold. And they're recurrence you just bring back. Familiar. There are songs right now in the genres of EDM, which that makes up more of the music programming that's on other stations in other countries. I mean, in Britain, there's a reason in Britain, Netherlands, France, Spain, Italy, whatever, their stations are more high energy and much more targeted to younger audiences because they're playing EDM. Because there's an audience that listens to EDM and they go to the events and they're not even remember, they're not even doing clubs anymore. You can have dance, sessions anywhere now these days because people can go ahead and do DJing wherever they want. With very limited equipment, you just find a room, find a place, find a balcony, whatever you want, and you got a party. I see that all the time. And it could be impromptu if you wanted to as well. We're going to have like the boiler room effect that you see certain artists that go and they'll play their music and they'll go out someplace and it's just like some dark, dank, underground, like rave type feel to it. And they just go ahead and have a big crowd of like young people. They're just out there to have fun. Think about the times that we used to have nightclubs and all to broadcast live from for radio stations. And that was the other part of like that extra engagement with the audience. Because the radio stations were already there. The DJs were there. You got to be known. You got to be there live. It could still be done like that now with even less equipment, with even better technology today. EDM, Afrobeats, which still hasn't been adopted over here yet. I did a show about that. Afrobeats right now is a new R&B. So like for urban stations, incorporate all these new songs that are coming in. Tyla, Thames, Arya Starr, Rema, Awake, all these people. WizKid, bring them all in. Burna Boy. You got so many songs in Afrobeats you can bring and you can start incorporating into the list and it would just encompass and would just kind of fit right in. K-pop, believe it or not, K-pop. Why is there's that show that brought up the new K-pop group Cat's Eye, and I see them on my TikTok feed all the time. And there are other artists out there that like there's XG, there's Blackpink, there's all these others that are out there. Of course, following the path that BTS laid out. And all those songs are very pop friendly. You can incorporate that into a pop playlist. Like a top 40 radio station should be hard to go ahead and program these days. You got so much other music you can play that's targeted to a younger audience right now. But like corporate radio people, they don't know what the trends of music are going on right now. They don't realize people are streaming this music, so much by the millions every week. They don't understand that part. If you're in a market like where I'm in South Florida, you could be playing reggaeton or dembow or other songs. You could be a little bit bilingual. It's probably very acceptable now these days, and people will be really into it. But they don't want to do that either. Choose not to. But you could do that now. But you only have so much time. Another 5 years or so. Because what's happening right now is that the DSPs, the digital streaming providers, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, they're all trying to find ways to incorporate. Listen, for the fact that if you think radio is not relevant anymore, then why are Spotify and YouTube Music trying to create AI playlists that'll be customized to the listener and trying to create voice-generated AI to complement those playlists? Why do we have DJ X on Spotify? Why is YouTube looking to go ahead and try to incorporate Gemini into YouTube Music? They're trying to create radio in the streaming services. Why would they want to do that? Corporate radio, I'm giving you the answer. If streaming is trying to experiment and trying to go and build that technology, once they get to that point, you will not have the time or the opportunity to be relevant anymore. Because once the streaming companies are able to perfect the voice AI DJ setups and the playlists, and they get it right, they won't need you anymore. They will not care about listening to a station that serves a certain number of people in their city. Because they'll have a radio station they can customize just for themselves. And you will lose that audience. And you'll never get them back. The only way you'll get them back is if they don't want to pay for the subscription. That's it. But it's pretty clear that people don't want to go ahead and listen to something that's free when it's inundated with ads that are full of things they don't even care about, that don't matter to them. So what answer do you have for that? By the way, you have apps out there that are also, and I tried the app, the Fader called FAIDR, I think it was. I did try it for a month. And their deal is that they can go ahead and use their AI technology to cut out the commercials of a radio station you're listening to, and they'll replace it with music that will be much like the station you're listening to. They actually are able to go ahead and replace your ads that you put in there. It will recognize when a commercial break is starting up, and then the AI technology will generate music to overlay and replace those commercials. That's happening too. What are you going to do about that? Now, the other part too is that you're going to assume that you're going to keep the people that are not on Wi-Fi, or the people that are going to just want to be free and still listen to something for free without going into a subscription. But more people are more than happy to get into a subscription for premium content. It's pretty clear. That's why the networks, you have free content there loaded with commercials, but more and more people are heading to or have been calling the cable for a long time. But cable and network were able to go ahead and stay together. And you still had a pretty good audience up until the streaming services decided to go and come in, and now it's all gone. And now at the point where you might be paying a little bit more now for streaming services, but the content's still the quality, you're still justifying it. So there are not people that are leaving streaming services by the boatload because they've also started to go into bundles. We know that's happening too. So radio still has a chance to go ahead and overcome all this, but they don't understand that there's a way to go and stop the decline. They can stop the bleeding, but they need to pay attention to what's going on and realize they don't have time to fool around anymore. These corporate radio companies, they need to stop dicking around and start doing things. Start making changes. And I've made solutions. I've given you ideas out there. I'm not asking for anything in return. If I could program one of those, I'll show you how to do it. I did it. 2019, I got a chance to go and program a radio station, and I got that station back to being financially solvent. If I had better sales help, I might have actually made that thing turn a profit. But you know what happened? I was able to get that station up to a certain point so that my friend could go ahead and get somebody else on a licensed marketing agreement to take over the station. And no matter what, they're making a good deal on it, and that deal still holds on right now today. How about that? Yeah. YouTube Music back in July, experimenting with the AI-driven radio feature. We talked about that. Spotify had their AI DJ feature back in February 2023. I mean, the thing is right now, I think you're going to work if Spotify didn't have a way of customizing your playlist that the way they do it, I'm not necessarily a fan of. I'm the kind of person that I don't want to have a playlist based on a mood or based on, just taking all my music and just clustering it together. I'm still somebody of the day. So it doesn't really work for me because for me, I feel like I have my playlist. Give me a DJ that just complements my playlist. That's what I want. Let it figure out how to do that. Because honestly, once one of these services do that, I will not go back to radio. I won't have to go back. I still listen to radio for sports play-by-play, but other than that, I don't need it for much else. I don't. So, YouTube Music, they're trying to prepare their own spin on the idea of AI radio. We haven't heard anything else new about this, but they want to go and do something about ask for music any way you like, an interface, and having a prompt and creating a custom radio station in response. They're going to get to that soon enough. Then you have Apple Music trying to create a discovery station. They want to create custom playlists and get a radio station on board to do that. Of course, they already have radio stations in there as well. I'm not necessarily into those either, but at least they're doing it. You also know that Spotify, not just with the AI-powered DJ feature, of course, they've been rolling out to other markets, but what they've also been doing, which we haven't talked about, is that they've tapped up an AI to create an AI-powered DJ for their service. And OpenAI is working with them to go and create that, a radio DJ. So there's X that they have right now, but they want to do something a little bit more. And I'm sure that they'll have an idea what they have. They also have Sonatic, that a company that Spotify acquired in June 2022. And so far, they've already had Xavier Jernigan as their ex, who's doing their Get Up Morning podcast and also being the DJ, the default DJ for all their DJ content, if you want to use the DJ feature. Spotify has their own AI playlist generator. Amazon Music has their own AI playlist generator. So they're already starting to create stations that you want. So you can have what you want to go and listen to, and it'll make it easy for you to go ahead and build it out. At the moment, the AI DJ now, you can actually find in more than 68 countries where Spotify is able to be there for you. And when they talk to Xavier Jernigan about the idea of the AI DJ, he says that, quote, you get the parts of radio that you're related to, the voice that you trust, a person that you trust, a personality that you trust, surrogate the music, giving you that context, giving you that storytelling. And then there's going to be for the Spanish audience, they're going to have Livy, a second AI DJ they're creating right now, that will serve as a Spanish language speaking subscriber base. Now, X comes from the music world because he worked for major label records with Def Jam Records, Republic Records, before he came to Spotify. He talks about that they have a whole team of the greatest music and culture experts in the world that are boots on the ground, bringing all their experience and knowledge to make it come alive. And he meets with a team of writers, music experts, and data curators weekly to guarantee the AI model stays updated on trends and relevant commentary. And so, look at the work that Spotify is doing right now to go and create a radio environment for their audience. It's not perfect yet, but again, it's only been a couple of years. But so far, the placement, when the DJ comes on and what it does, it's good. My thing is just that I don't like what the curation does, where it will go ahead and take my taste in music and then just overly round it. I don't want that part. I don't want to go from like such an extreme from one to the other. Like I have an extreme when it comes to when I listen to rock music or listen to soul music or listen to pop music or reggaeton music or whatever. And I might have a certain list that will go 40 years up and back. But I also don't want to change genres so expansively that it doesn't feel right. That's the part I don't want to do. I don't want to go from Tate McRae to American Breed, or I don't want to go from Frank Sinatra to, Velvet Revolver. I don't want to do that. It doesn't sound right. I don't feel like listening to La Mêlée from the Dembo world to, I don't know, Tinashe. That's a different story. I actually have that mix. I'm trying to think of a better idea. Hold on. Okay, Towers of London to La Mêlée. There's a wild mix for you, huh? Or how about going from Linkin Park to, say, Dave Brubeck Quartet? I don't get that part, but that's what X will do if I use that DJ feature. Nothing against X. And he's got a good voice, by the way. He is good for what he does. But that's radio for you. And the thing is, that's one person you got to bring in. And then the people that work around him to go and create the content, great. And again, they also follow along with trends. They're trying to stay current and up to date to make sure everything's in there. So it's cool to see those kind of things. But that's what radio's up against. I need to keep that in mind. Now, one of the areas I was going into that I didn't get a chance to go and talk about, which kind of also prompted me to talk about the decline of radio this week, was a story from Radio Inc. John Shamby writing the story about how he talked to almost 24 radio programmers about the future of radio to ask very simple questions. Presented anonymously, by the way. And when they were asked about the belief about the biggest challenges facing today's radio industry, they were broken into 5 areas: staff reductions, lack of talent development, ratings methodology, more competition, and commercial load. He talked to one programmer talking about staff cuts. Quote, "As we've all seen in recent weeks, more cuts have been taking place among the companies that have the most opportunity to influence progress in our industry. It's been said by more than enough in our industry, but I'll scream it again. Radio's biggest advantages are people. We are the original influencers. Radio's reach is massive. You can't argue that." Which, again, at the start of this episode, I wanted to give credit where credit's due for those that are still trying to go ahead and work within the ranks now to try to make radio good. I don't ever want to go ahead and dismiss and discourage those people for trying. Some of them are not as good as I would hope they would be, but also talent development and being given the freedom to go ahead and talk more like they are and represent themselves more authentically would be really helpful. And then he talked about the corporate level, saying that another person says that, quote, "Many radio companies are trying to achieve the margins they existed more than a decade ago, and because of that, they're only thinking about the short term when they begin cost cutting. They believe the salaries of seasoned local personalities can be replaced by less expensive voice track talent. And while a company might see short-term success with these cuts, the long-term impacts are grave. The radio industry cannot out-Spotify. And then in talent development, they say that hiring new honor personalities and investing time in building them as talent influencers, they are out there, but making more money elsewhere, especially part-time pay. The truth is most radio companies, the hourly pay is less than what people can make at Walmart or Starbucks. Right. And when asked about what the industry could do to remain relevant for the next 5-10 years, they say, invest in talent. Current and new is crucial. One PD says that there are really interesting younger people in radio who could help us change the game to market to younger and more digitally focused resources, but we got to give them a chance. They got to strive to revert to live overnight weekend shows to continue to grow these new talent. Take the time to truly listen to how the younger generations want to utilize our products. Trust them with social media, and even if it's different, it's always been done in our industry. Hire diversely and listen as much as you teach. And that it's time for reinvention of the whole medium as well. The current spot loads and expectations for listeners to stick with us are unrealistic. Radio has always provided something that other mediums cannot. That said, it's difficult to expect a listener to stick to around 6 to 8 commercials each block before returning the music. And another one says that we need to be willing to take smart chances and evolve. The entire world around us has changed. How people spend their time, get entertainment, what they consider entertainment, and what they value are 180 degrees from what they did 10 years ago. Why do many radio think that the things we've done for 10, 20, and in some cases 30 years ago still apply? Well, I will say there's still things that you could take that happened in the business before that still work today. And as I said, if you want to take one of the things that people in radio used to do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago was we had great talent back then that would perform, could engage with the audience. You had them helping us to discover new music. They were the tastemakers, the curators. They would help us find new music. So they would be influencers, just as was before. It's what the talent brought in. Add that with the new technology, you could reinvent radio. Come back for another Broadcasters Podcast next week. Remember, content is king. Control of your content is in your hands.